Good morning. Today is the 18th day of the second Adar, the 28th of March. We're going to be looking at the fifth reading of Parashat Tzav, and we're going to look at a word that has already appeared more than once in the Torah, but we haven't had a chance to talk about it. And it's actually very related to the time of year that we're in now, the very end of the month of Adar, the last 2 weeks. And we're just before the first day of Nisan. The word we're going to look at is in Leviticus 8:15. Now, you know that I usually use, for the English translation, I use my friend Moshe Vishnevsky's Chumash. I think some of you have purchased it also. I think it's a tremendous translation. In today's reading, I think there is a little bit of a he had an opportunity, a missed opportunity to use a beautiful word for one of these words in the verse. Let's look at it. So it says Moses slaughtered it. It's talking about the sin offering bull. Again, we're at Leviticus 8:15. And Moses took the blood and placed it on the altars. Here he writes protrusions with his finger around and purified the altar. He then poured the rest of the blood on the base of the altar and sanctified the altar upon which to effect atonement. The word that he translated as protrusions in Hebrew, I'll just read it, is karnot. Karnot literally means horns. But it also, the sages took this word, keren, and they connected it with another word called zavit, and they made keren zavit, which means corner. Now I want you to listen to the word keren. How would you write that in English? You would write it something like Keren. And you said literally means a horn, and they took it and they connected it with another word, creating a composite word, keren zavit, which means corner. Now think about keren and corner. You even hear that they're the same. But this goes further, and we haven't really ever discussed the influence that Hebrew has had on many, many languages, and we're not just talking about through the Bible. It seems that there's many languages that have no or had no Bible until recently, and certainly didn't know the Hebrew version of the Bible, and the word still had a tremendous impact. In fact, usually when you look at these words, like I'll say what the other word is, crown. A horn is like a crown on the animal. So this word crown, or in its other variation that we're very familiar with now because of the past few years, corona, which is the I think the Latin version of it. So, or a coronation, when you crown someone. So keren, corona, there's almost no question in the world that they came from keren, from horn. And then you get this idea of a keren zavit, of a corner, and that seems to be just very strange. Like, how did that even happen? How is the corner connected to a crown? There might actually be no connection. It might be the corner somehow came from somewhere else entirely. But at least in terms of the phonology, it sounds like they're all connected. And so instead of calling it protrusions, he could have called it the altar's crowns, horns, which is the usual translation. I don't think he liked the horns because he didn't want it to sound like it was some kind of, it was sharp or edgy at the end. But another simple explanation would be the altar's four corners. The corners themselves are protrusions. And if you've ever seen an ancient altar from the Middle East, they all had corners in all four corners, and they're usually just like you write, it's a protrusion that comes out. And what was this done? What was done with this? So he says here, and this again, this was done with many of the sacrifices, that the blood from the sacrifice was poured on, or touched upon, splattered a little bit upon each one of the corners. And what is this symbolizing? Well, if you remember, not long ago we talked about the construction of the copper altar, the altar that was sitting in the courtyard. And we said that each part of the altar, and the altar itself in totality, is like the form of a person. We said specifically that this is the feminine form, and it's wearing a girdle even, like we had all this. So when you're talking about the corners of the altar, you're talking about the crown of the altar. Why would there be 4 parts in the crown? That would be a very interesting thing. We don't know about something like that. Usually we divide the sphere of crown into 3. Where would we suddenly get a 4th element? So, I don't know if you've seen this, but on the tefillin cases, the tefillin, the phylacteries as they're called in English, so there are 2 shins. There are 2 letter shins, one on the right side, one on the left side of the head tefillin, of the head phylactery. And one of the shins, I hope I'm getting this right, on the right side is like a regular shin. It has 3 heads. But there's a interesting Kabbalistic reason that on the left side, I could be that I'm switching them. I'm not 100% certain right now. On the left side, there is a 4-headed shin, and 4 crowns, as it were. When you look at the letter shin, that's exactly what it looks like. This is exactly what it looks like, but usually we only have 3, and there you have 4. And these 4, they hint to a lot of things. There's a lot of allusions to it. Why specifically 4? Let's not get into it. Let's leave it at that. But this idea of the corner, the crown, it appears in another element of the altar. Where does it also appear? We hear there's a word called kir hamizbeach. It's called the wall of the altar. Most of the sacrifices did not have to be, the blood did not have to be dropped on the corners, meaning on the crowns of the altar, but it did have to be poured or touched upon the wall of the altar. And what's the difference between wall and corner or crown? In English, it doesn't seem to be any connections whatsoever, but in Hebrew, it's the same root. The root of the word for a wall, kir, is the same as keren. We're talking about a 2-letter root. A 2-letter root is different. It's not phonetic, it's morphological. So even if in this case they even sound the same, but it doesn't have to sound the same. It's more the fact that they have the 2 letters kuf and reish. Why is this so connected to our time of the year? In Genesis, when we were reading about Noah, when Noah comes out of the ark, so we find this verse, a very interesting verse, that says that there are 6 seasons in the year. 6 seasons. Now, the simplest division of the year is that there are 2 seasons. You can call it, you can say that the simplest thing is that there's the heat and there's the cold. How do you say cold in Hebrew? So cold in Hebrew is kar. It is the 2-letter morphological root of these 2 words. So let's think for a moment about this. What does this mean? We're adding the blood to either the crown or to the wall. And both these words stem from the root, the 2-letter root, that means kol or kal. It means coldness. So what could be cold? Well, it could be either the crown is cold, not because it's necessarily cold, but because it's out of sight and it's out of mind. We always say the crown is above our consciousness. So to place blood there is like to warm ourselves up to the fact that we have a higher part of ourselves, the super consciousness. But to place blood on the wall, the kir of the altar, is like to take blood and warm up or touch the heart. Because we're talking about the height, especially the height of where this was placed on the altar, is like the area that's above the diaphragm, where the heart is. And then there's also pouring some of the blood on the base of the altar, which is something else. The base is not from the same root. The idea here is apparently that the blood is warming things up. It's doing something to awaken us. And that's the symbolism behind it. So getting back to that verse in Parshat Noach. So there we saw, I'll say something more in a moment. There we saw Zera v'katzir, v'kor v'chom, v'kaitz v'choref lo yishbotu. That there will be time of seed and time of reaping, time of cold, time of heat, summer and winter. And so there's this verse in Noach that says that there are actually 6 different seasons. So again, the simplest thing is to take the 12 months of the year and to divide them into hot and cold, or call it summer and winter. After that, you can divide it into 3 seasons. How would you have 3 seasons? Well, you could take the 12 divided by 3. Then you'd have 4 months in each season. And the way it would divide is that you'd have our month, Adar, Nisan, Iyar, and Sivan. They would be called Revaya. Revaya means balanced. A lot of people think that Revaya in Hebrew means something like you're quelched or quenched, that you've drunk enough, so now that you're full. But really what it means is balance. These 4 months that we just started, Adar, Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, they're months of balance. If you live in Israel, you know all about this. These are the most pleasant months in general. They're really balanced. Then the summer begins in what we call Tammuz, Av Elul Tishrei. That's really summer. And then we have winter, Cheshvan, Kislev, Tevis, and Shvat. But we also said that this can also be divided not into 3, but into 6. And then you have 2 months in each one of the seasons. The thing, though, is that what Rashi quotes, and is usually the way that we see this, is that these are not full months, but rather the period that we're in now is called kol. It's called coldness. And when is it? It's from the second half of Shvat. It contains all of Adar, meaning our month, and the first half of Nisan. That time is called kol. And it would make a lot of sense that during this period, as we're coming out of the winter, it's called cold. It's not the winter itself, it's just called cold. So taking the blood, the warm blood of the sacrifice, and putting it on the corners and putting it on the wall of the altar, these things are meant to warm us up. Until when? Until the middle of Nisan. The middle of Nisan is the first day of Passover. So we're now in a period of warming back up. After we've been in something, well, in Israel you can never hibernate; it's never that cold. But after we've been in something of a colder, more lethargic existence. A lot of people will say that in Israel they actually come to life when it's winter and when it's cold, because it's hotter during the rest of the year, and is it not that much? It's actually harder to act. But it's not just that; it's also how long the day is, and now the day is starting to lengthen again. And the moment that we really talk about serving God, the length of the day makes a big difference, because the daylight hours are hours in which a person feels the divine presence much more than they do during the night. And there's a verse that says this, Lagid chasdecha baboker ve'emunotcha baleilot. Lagid baboker chasdecha ve'emunotcha baleilot, to say your loving kindness, or to feel your loving kindness during the day and your faith during the night. So this is very interesting. It's still a small excursion into this whole world of how Hebrew affected the different languages. And to think about this word corner, how in the world did it become, where did it come from? And why is it so similar to this word keren? And are they connected in some way? And again, this is the time of the year that we're beginning to warm up again, beginning to come out. And it leads to the end of the coldness, which is the first day of Passover. Thanks for joining today. Hope to see you tomorrow.